It is me again. I'm going to read to you a text. It's called informational text. Basically, it is going to teach you facts and information about a topic. It could be a person, a science topic. It could be how to do something. Informational text is nonfiction that tells you some information. So I want you to listen, and I want you to listen for some things that you know about the railroad. This is about a man named Elijah McCoy, and he has a lot of things about the railroad that we remember him for. So I want you to listen for some things that maybe you've heard before. Now, I'm not going to show you any pictures because it's an informational text, and I want you to get the images in your mind. Besides, it doesn't come with pictures. Title is A High Quality Inventor. Elijah McCoy was the son of slaves who had escaped to Canada on the Underground Railroad. He was born in Canada in 1844, but when he was 5 years old, his family returned to the United States, settled in Michigan, and became U.S. citizens. Now I'm going to pause right there and think, that does not sound like my life. I bet he went through a lot of hardships and a lot of heartache in a life like that. Canada is above the United States, very far north, and his parents were slaves, which means they were owned by someone else. And before Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, they were treated very, very unfairly. So there's a lot of heartache in this man's life. Let's listen to see how he overcame that, if he did. Not much is known about Elijah's childhood, except that he was a curious youngster. That's just another word for kid. He loved taking things apart, figuring out how they worked, and putting them back together. His parents were impressed with their son's skills and thinking ability. They saved money to send him to an engineering school in Scotland when he was 15 years old. After several years of study and training, he returned to Michigan as a master mechanic and engineer. So again, thinking about that, 15 years old is not very old. His parents sent him all the way to Scotland, which is across the ocean, over on the other side of the world. Scotland is near Europe and near Ireland, and it's very, very far away. And way back then, there probably weren't a whole lot of telephones just to call home, and I would miss my mommy. So even though his parents were slaves, they worked hard to provide for their son. When he couldn't find a job as an engineer, he worked on a train as a fireman and an oilman. The job changed his life. One of his tasks was to oil the train's parts, such as the engine and axles and bearings. Every several miles, the train was stopped, and the oilman jumped out to apply oil by hand to keep the train running smoothly. That sounds like a very hard work. Elijah thought that there must be a way to apply oil without stopping the train. In 1872, he invented and patented a lubricating cup, which allowed oil to drip automatically on the places where it was needed. The device became successful because it made train travel more efficient. So he saw a problem and he found a way to fix it. Other men tried to duplicate or copy Elijah's invention, but their designs were not as good. His invention was so superior that train car manufacturers began to insist on the real McCoy. Elijah McCoy's name became synonymous with having the real thing. I don't know if you've ever heard that term before, the real McCoy. I bet your parents and grandparents have. And if you've heard it, it means something's real. Let's say you collect Pokemon cards. There are fakes and there are real ones. So if you see a real one, you can say it's the real McCoy. It means that it is an original, it's a real, it's not a knockoff or a fake. Elijah's youthful tinkering led to 57 patents in his lifetime, many dealing with improvements on his lubricating cup. train talk. Have you ever felt like you are running out of steam or found yourself sidetracked? If you have, then you've been using train-inspired language. The first transcontinental railroad, wow, that's a big word. Transcontinental means across the continent. That means a train that goes all the way across the USA. And other railroads that followed not only connected the nation, but also helped invent a new way of talking. Some of the new words described railroad machinery, such as fish plates, which are metal couplers that join the rails, and cow catchers. Those are the pointy grills attached to the front of locomotives that helped push obstacles off the track. I don't think I'd want to be a cow caught by a train. Railroad workers also used colorful slang to describe their jobs. Slang is kind of like that dude language I was talking about earlier today. They worried about spilling the diamonds, which meant to not shovel the coal carefully, or being made to dance the carpet. That means getting called in front of a railroad official to be disciplined. If you've ever heard about getting called on the carpet, maybe your parents have, it means when you get in trouble. So they said dance on the carpet. Over time, railroad terminology made its way into everyday usage. You know how trains travel along different rail lines and sometimes have to move from one track to another track. The words used to refer to the shifting of trains inspired parallels to describe the way people move through life. So, stay on track became used to describe a person who remains focused and consistent. So when you're working on your homework, if mama hollers over her shoulder, stay on track, she's using train language and didn't even know it. Get off track is used to refer to a person who gets distracted. To get sidetracked describes someone who gets diverted from a main purpose or issue. I know sometimes I get sidetracked. I go to the kitchen to get something to drink and notice something wrong in the living room and then forget I was ever going to the kitchen to begin with. I got sidetracked. I'm sure it never happens to you guys. A person who gets derailed is brought to a sudden halt. A person who is off the rails and acting as if he or she has no sense of reality is like a train that's jumped the rails and can no longer be controlled. So when your little brother is screaming through the house, acting like a madman, you can tell mom and dad that he is off the rails. Phrases describing railroad situations became popular too. A distracted person is asleep at the switch, referring to how train workers who operated switches had to remain alert in order to safely move trains from one track to another. I've heard people say asleep at the wheel. Kind of like when you're driving and you're really, really tired. Dangerous. Seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I've heard that one. That was a literal expression used by train crews. Literal means they really, really meant that in real life. They saw a light at the end of the tunnel. For a train crew or a conductor, that meant you were getting ready to crash. People use it today to describe a moment when a possible solution to a problem comes into focus. Making the grade, which today means successfully measuring up or completing something, was inspired by the literal way that a train successfully climbs a steep slope or incline, also known as a grade. So if your teacher says you're making the grade, it means you did your assignment correctly. But in train language, that meant that they were climbing up the mountain and successfully got to the top. So lots of words that we hear when we talk and when we read, they don't really mean exactly what they say. They're called figurative language. We're going to be talking a lot about that. The opposite is literal language. Literal language is exactly what you mean. Figurative language is saying something that's kind of like an expression. Like when you're super mad and you say, get ready to pop. Well, you're not really going to pop because, my, that would be disgusting. Guts and stuff all over the floor. That's figurative language. Literal language, if you said I'm getting ready to pop and it was literal, then you would really actually explode. So when we're reading, we need to think, is that really what they mean? Or is it an expression that means something else? We're going to talk some more about inventors, and tomorrow you're going to read the story about Henry Ford and Thomas Edison. But today, I just wanted to give you a little bitty intro. So try to think of some other train lingo you've heard, or tell Mom about the things that you've learned. Thanks for listening.